My name's Uncle Hodge, and today on this episode of The Quiet Rifle, you, oh beloved viewer, get to watch me fumble my way through the harmonic tuning process for my 25 caliber FX Crown. Now, a quick disclaimer, you may have heard the term, not just a pretty face. I am just a pretty face. None of this information is really my own. I've just gleaned it from a whole bunch of different sources like other videos, which I will link down in the description, forum posts and stuff like that. So I suggest that you fully immerse yourself in every different kind of information that is available. And I am not taking any responsibility for you voiding your warranty or breaking any local or federal laws. So make sure that you do that research on your own. It's not my problem. No. So, in this video, we're going to cover things like safety considerations, the tools you're going to need, the process of disassembly, shooting over the crony and adjusting the hammer spring while doing so, reassembly, and then accuracy testing. And for those of you with the attention span of a hyperactive goldfish, I will be putting in the description an index so that you can just click on the bit that you want to watch the most instead of having to do the old click and slide. So, yeah, let's get after it. Part 1. Theory. What is harmonic tuning? Basically, you are going to perfect the relationship between your regulator pressure and your hammer spring tension. And why would you want to do that? You want to do that because we have different options within JSB's lineup of ammo that works really well with this gun. So on the left over here, we have a 25 grain King, and on the right, we have a 33 grain King Heavy Mark II. So my Crown came tuned for the 25 grain King, but I like big heavy things because I'm a meathead. So we're going to tune it for the heavier one. Now you would have seen previously that I did some regulator only tuning to find a nice quiet accurate tune only with the regulator, but those results weren't as good as they probably could have been, so we're just going to tune it properly. And as you would have seen in that video, the point of impact was actually dropping as the regulator pressure was going up without turning the hammer spring out more. So if you increase the regulator pressure without increasing the hammer spring tension, you will lose velocity, which seems a little counterintuitive, but it's because the hammer spring flies forward and hits the valve, but the pressure inside the regulator shuts the valve too fast because there's not enough power in that hammer spring to hold that valve open for long enough to use all of that increased air that you've just turned up in your regulator. So you may be thinking, let's just wind that hammer spring all the way out and max that puppy out. But if you do that, you're going to hit that valve so hard that it's going to stay open for longer than it needs to. And you're going to waste air, and it's going to be an inefficient way of launching that pellet down the barrel. So you want to either max that hammer spring out and then shoot it over the crony and wind it maybe a quarter or a half a turn back each time. Graph your results either in a notebook, or I'm going to actually use Microsoft Excel so I can get a visual representation of it. And you're going to see a plateau in the graph, and then it's going to start dropping again as you continue to deload that hammer spring tension. And we want to find the spot just before it drops off, and that will be our ideal hammer spring tension for that particular regulator pressure, because it's hitting it exactly at the right weight to open that valve for just long enough to use the perfect amount of air, and then it's shut again. So we're not going to waste any air, and we're going to get all the velocity that we can get for that particular regulator pressure. So after we've done that, we're going to go down and test it at the range, which is another important part of rounding out this whole theory because of the internal ballistics of the gun. When you send that pellet down the barrel vibrates, and if you time the exit of the pellet coming out the end of the barrel at just the right time in that vibration wave, you're going to get a more accurate gun at the end of the day. So even though we're using the perfect amount of air, you may end up on a less than ideal vibration node at the end of the rifle. So have a look in the description below if you want to learn more about external ballistics. I'll link a couple of different videos in there, and hopefully that will be a better explanation than what I've just said. But at the end of the day, if you harmonically tune it perfectly and you're still getting trash groups, maybe you need to up or down the regulator pressure.
Part 2, the siphoning.
There's a number of different hazards that we need to control for. Obviously, whenever you're shooting a rifle, you need to account for ricochets, so we need a safe backstop. I have to account for the noise level of my gun, so I'm going to be shooting it inside my shed here, so it's going to be very loud, so hearing protection. We're going to be using eye protection as well, and we're also going to be referring to our hierarchy of controls to eliminate or engineer out higher level risks that can't be stopped with PPE, because PPE is the last line of defense. If you're relying on PPE for anything, you've probably gone wrong somewhere. So think about your situation. You might be at the range and you may have to abide by all of their safety rules, but that has its own set of different things that you have to worry about. So try and weigh up all of your different risk factors. So think about things like noise, ricochets, sunburn, if there's no shade at the range, all those different things, and try and put in place a control to control that hazard. So I'm also going to be locking my door to make sure that nobody else wanders in and gets their ears blown out while I'm shooting in here. So yeah, think outside the box, imagine things that could go wrong, and try and control them.
Part 3, what are you going to need?
Alright, so hopefully you've got all this stuff already if you're shooting air guns. So we've got eyes and ears to keep us all safe. We've got a 1.5mm, a 2mm, a 2.5mm, and a 3mm Allen key, or hex head wrench, whatever you want to call them. Notepad and pen so that you can record your stuff. I'm going to be using a laptop instead of that, but that's all good. You don't need a laptop if you don't want to lug one of them around to the range. Ballistic chronograph. Caldwell's pretty good. Mine seems to work great, so it was cheap and it was good. Happy with that. And of course your rifle and enough ammo to get the job done.
Part 4, disassembly.
Okay, so step 1 with disassembly is always remove your magazine, pop him out, and make sure that your rifle is decocked. So I didn't have my magazine in there to start with, but just to show you how to decock, you're going to have to pull the cocking lever all the way back, pull your magazine out, make sure there's nothing in the barrel, and then you're going to ride that cocking handle forward whilst pulling the trigger. So just like that. Perfectly safe, not cocked, all good. Alrighty, next we're going to remove the safety. So just get your little 2mm Allen wrench, wind her out. That's what it looks like there. So there's a few different bits in there. We're just going to keep that all together, put him up there. Okay, so next step, turn your hammer wheel around to max if it isn't already. You should be fine to do that because we've decocked the weapon, it's all good. Get in there with your 1.5mm Allen wrench, undo the screw that holds it in there. Now be careful with this, underneath here there's some ball bearings and some springs. So I'm just going to cover this with my finger so the screw doesn't go wandering off on me. Flip him over carefully. Oh, we've lost one of the balls already, but you can see there's a ball bearing and the other one's in there. This is another tool that will make your life easier. I probably should have mentioned this before, but this is just a little extendable badooba with a mirror and a magnet on it. So I'm going to pull the ball bearing out with the magnet, and you can see the spring comes along with it. Do not lose the springs, do not lose the ball bearings. Put them somewhere safe. I'll pop them up there for now. Put you back where you belong. Grab that other spring out. There we go. 2 springs, 2 ball bearings, 1 screw, 1 hammer wheel. And you can see this lobe on the hammer wheel there. That's going to tell us which direction we need to screw the hammer spring screw when we can reveal that later on. Next up we've got the rear stock screw and the forward stock screw. The rear one is 2.5 mil, so I'll get him in there. Like that. Bit of the old lefty loosey righty tighty. Undo that one. Tricky to do on camera. Remove that. That's it there. Remove the brass bushing that comes with it. That one there, just so we don't lose it. And then switch over to our 3mm. Pop him in up the front. There we go. Out you come. Yeah, a bit more. You might have to flip it over. If you do flip it over, just make sure you're holding all of it, otherwise it'll rattle around. There we go. Out she comes. Pop it up there. Now we should be right to lift it out carefully from the stock. There we go. Okay, put the stock off, and now I'll show you the hammer spring. Right, so now you can see the hammer spring. This is it here, moving back and forth. And this little tiny screw in here is the one that we want to adjust. Now we can see with our max wheel, when that's mounted in there properly, with the max at the top where it should be, you can see that lobe is pushing this as far away from it as it can. So we want to screw this little screw inside here all the way in, and that will max out our hammer spring tension. So to do that, I'm using a 1.27mm Allen key because my 1.5 doesn't fit. I believe it's supposed to be a 1.5, but I guess that's what happens when you buy Chinese tools. So you just pop him in there like that and wind it in. It's going to be pretty stiff. Don't force it if you think it's not going to go. You may have to heat it up with a hairdryer or like a little heat gun or something. I wouldn't recommend using an open flame on it. But yeah, just warm it up. Usually that makes a big difference. Okay, so I've been doing this for a little while now. And as you can see, when the max setting is not quite at the top yet, and this is jammed up all the way to the far left, then you've gone too far. So if I was to push this in, it's going to want to spin my wheel back around. So you want your maximum setting to actually be at the 12 o'clock position, not at the 11 o'clock position where it is now. So I'm going to have to back this out a couple of turns to get it to settle in where I want it to settle. Okay, so here we are. We've pretty much got it dialed right in. So if I take it just off max, turn it up a little bit, max won't quite go any further. So we just back it off a smidgy. A little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, nearly there. Back it off a tiny bit more, and there we go. We're spinning past 12 o'clock. So that's about the maximum safe hammer spring extension that we want to get, because we are going to be tuning it with the hammer wheel back on. It's not going to be off. So now that we've maxed out our hammer spring, we're going to pop our little springy jingies back in there. You. Okay, ball bearings back on top. One there. One there. Hammer wheel set back at max again. There we go. Screw back in. I believe that was the 1.5 mil. There we go. Doesn't have to be world-endingly tight, just tight enough. And then check that it Clicks fine. Happy days. Next up, put your safety back in. Check out these flat edges. They line up with those flat edges. Straight up and down for fire. 2mm Allen wrench. Get him on in there. Now you don't have to be crazy super strong man with these. This is just sitting on a little O-ring. So just wind it back in until you feel it pinch up a little bit. Be gentle. There's no need to torque it up. That's enough. And now you'll see clicks into its little detent real nice, and we're not tearing anything to pieces. Okay, so now our gun has been disassembled, reassembled, and is ready for tuning. So our hammer spring is maxed out, our little hammer wheel is on max, and we know now the only way we really need to go is to begin deloading that hammer spring by winding that little screw out. So we'll jump on the crony and start banging away, and hopefully we'll get a nice little visual representation from my Excel graph, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Part 5, tuning.
Right, so here's my setup here. You have to forgive the atrocious mess that is my shed at the moment, but we're basically just going to be doing this, plugging on down there, and I've got my cable coming up, and I'll have the old smartphone hooked in there, and then we'll develop a graph. The tweaking begin. So first off, we're going to adjust our regulator pressure. I'm going to take it up to probably 135, maybe 140. We'll see where it ends up. And when you do this, as always, just read through your manual while you're doing it. So turning the regulator adjustment screw counterclockwise will increase the regulator pressure. And you're right to increase the reg pressure with pressure in the bottle. As long as you don't decrease it with pressure in the bottle, you're going to be alright. I've done that in a different video, so have a look at that if you're curious about that. I think it was experimental tuning 2. Yeah, probably. Anyway, off we go. Counterclockwise. Alright, that looks good to me. Just up on the 140 mark. It's not overly important, you don't necessarily need a digital gauge, but if you had a digital gauge and you wanted to check it, that'd be a good way of doing things, but I'm really more results orientated at the moment than numbers orientated, I suppose. So we'll just go with this, assume that is pretty much correct, and we'll try it out and see where we end up. So the basic tuning routine is as follows. Open your gun up, magazine, in she goes. Make sure it's all square. Press the round off, record the data, which is 810 feet per second, and that is one turn in from max. Now we're going to open the cocking lever, remove the magazine, decock the weapon by holding the trigger and riding the cocking handle forward. Now we're decocked and we can adjust the hammer spring again. So we're going to take it out. One more turn. Down she goes. Flip it back over again. Open her up. Pop your magazine back in. Line up the next round. And keep repeating until you've got your full set of data. Alrighty, so if you want to do this with Excel, you just go over to your first two columns and you use the first one for muzzle velocity and the second one for how many turns, or alternatively, or probably more accurately, you could use a measurement if you have a very accurate set of calipers that you can measure the distance between the hammer spring block and the actual block of the gun. But yep, you can see there, these first few, that was about 1 magazine's worth, and it went all the way up to about 14 of the possible turns, and it was straight up trash. That is evidence to me that it is hitting the valve harder than it needs to, and it is wasting air. So after that, next mag came through, and we went from 15 all the way up to 29 turns, and as you can see, it's much better. So if we were to continue this trend, it would eventually trend down. I don't really see any point in wasting the ammo because we've already got a nice trend heading down. So what we're basically going to do is wind it back from 29 back up to about 15 or 16, maybe even 18. Seems to be a little bit more stable. It's like 18 is the start of the really nice stable line. So we'll go back to there and then we'll shoot maybe a 10-shot string and see how consistent it is. Okay, so I wound it back out 18 turns. 18 of the possible turns that I could make with that little Allen wrench. And this flat line here, very unassuming, very boring, very flat looking line, is 16 rounds. So I put a whole magazine through it, and they were all almost exactly the same, which is exactly what we want. So this is proof of concept, I suppose. We've got a very consistent regulator and hammer spring setting that we've found. So we'll be happy to sit with that. It's just under 900 feet per second. I think the slowest one was like 866 feet per second, and the quickest one was like 875 or something like that. So that's hooking along there pretty good, and should yield us some good results down at the range. So I've got to go down there and test it, see how it shoots groups, probably at the 50 meter mark, I'd say.
Part 6, accuracy test.
Alrighty, back in the man cave. A bit rushed at the moment because there's a big old thunderstorm rolling over. It's very humid, and I ran down the range and rushed out those groups. I think I could do a lot better with these groups on this tune. I didn't wait for my heart rate to slow down or anything. I was just like dish 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 because I wanted to run this recording through before the rain starts making too much noise. But these are the groups I shot. So we've got a 10mm group, a 23mm group, 16mm group, and a 25mm group. So those all average out to be 18.5mm groups at 50 meters. I also did some shooting with the power level set to 3, but because I'm a muppet, I didn't do up the hammer wheel tight enough, and if you do fail to tighten that hammer wheel up properly, if it's set to anything other than max, it will, as soon as you cock it and load that hammer spring up, it'll spin that turret all the way back around and it'll end up on minimum. So I shot some groups on minimum and they came out pretty good as well. Not to be sniffed at, they averaged about 30mm, which is pretty good as well considering how quiet it was. It was lovely and quiet. But as far as Coroni numbers go, previously on the old tune, the factory tune that this came with, bear in mind that it wasn't tuned for what it's tuned for now. It wasn't tuned for these 33.95 grain King Heavy Mark IIs. It was tuned for the 25 grain Kings. But on that old tune, shooting these big heavy King Mark IIs, the standard deviation was 3.86 feet per second, the extreme spread was 15 feet per second, and the average muzzle velocity was 835 feet per second. Now today we've tweaked it up to just under 140 bar for regulator pressure and tuned the hammer spring, and now we're getting an extreme spread of 2.42 feet per second, a standard deviation of 2.42, a extreme spread of 9 feet per second, and average muzzle velocity of 870 feet per second. So as far as the first round of tuning goes, that's pretty good. good muzzle velocity, very consistent. Extreme spread of 9 is great. I'm happy with that. Standard deviation is really small as well, so we've got really tight elevation on the groups. It's really just me pulling the trigger too early while my heartbeat's thumping while I'm running back and forth from the target to try and beat the rain. So yes, happy days. As far as future tuning goes, I may try and wind it up just a little bit more and tune it again, just to get those flying at over 900 feet per second. That would be good, but that may end up costing me too much air. So I have to sort of weigh it up and decide, because I am probably going to still do that, even though it will cost more air, just because I'm probably mostly going to be shooting it on hammer spring setting 3, so it's going to be quite a fair bit dialed back, and it's going to be quite economical to use on that pressure level. But yeah, something to think about. I think we could probably spend a little bit more of that regulator and build her up over 140, maybe somewhere around 145 would get you at about 900 feet per second, I think. So yeah, there you have it. All right, so I reckon that'll about do us for today. That'll wrap us up. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was useful to you. Feel free to leave a comment and share this on whatever forum you attend. Smash that thumbs up button like it owes you money. That's always a big help. It helps other people find the channel, and hopefully they find my info useful as well. And sooner or later I'm going to have a Patreon thingy going, so you can drop $1 in my pocket and I'll be spending all of that money on ammo, beer and new camera gear. Yes, fun stuff. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.